adults have named nurses as the most trusted profession in the country. Today, we are joined by two innovators who have made a mark on the nursing community. Dr. Judith Shamian is an alumna of Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing, and she graduated with her PhD in 1988. She is President Emerita of the International Council of Nurses, an organization that represents 130 national nursing associations and more than 27 million nurses worldwide. She also served as president and CEO of the Victorian Order of Nurses and president of the Canadian Nurses Association. In addition to her extensive international work, Dr. Shamian was Vice President of Nursing at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto for 10 years and served for 5 years as the Chief Nurse of Canada, and she's held various academic positions since 1989. And we have a younger innovator in our midst today, and that is a high school student, Elizabeth Grace Gowell. She has a passion for literature, language, history, and world cultures. In 2019, her grandmother shared with her the story, her own story, as a nurse in World War II and her immigration experience. Elizabeth Grace created a documentary called Do Justly, Love Mercy, and Walk Humbly. Inspired by the stories of her grandparents who immigrated from India and the Philippines, Elizabeth Grace created the Justly Project, which expanded efforts to share nursing stories and history with the Philippine Nurses Association. The first season of the Justly Project covered January to July of 2021 and produced more than 200 video clips from dozens of interviews with Filipino-American nurses and their firsthand stories about the pandemic. I am pleased to welcome both of these remarkable women today. The first person we will hear from is Dr. Judith Shamian.
Thank you, Carol. It's always great to be in CASE. It has a special place in my heart. And Elizabeth, you were saying that this is your first visit, but hopefully first of many. This is an incredible organization and university, and it creates leaders all over the world. So there's a lot to take away from here. And as always, can I just get the first slide up, please? Thank you so much. Am I supposed to do it? That's not. Okay. Escape. Perfect. Every time I come here, I have a special feeling for the university, but I have a very special feeling for this woman, for Joyce Fitzpatrick. The first time when I started my PhD here and we were sitting in the lounge in the old building, the statement that Joyce made, and that goes back in '84, you are not here just to get your PhD. You are here to become a leader. And those were exactly the words in that time, and proceeded to push that agenda throughout our years at CASE. And I don't think I would have stood here today if not for the leadership and the learning that I have been able to take away from FPB. And having said that, what I have done today, and I said to a few of you, I have developed a completely new presentation that doesn't build on a lot of the other material I use usually, because I look at FPB and I look at the academy, at the Shaughnessy Academy, as the organization that pushed the frontiers. So Joyce and I, and subsequently with Marian, had the discussions of needing to raise leaders beyond the executive level. There are dime a dozen of leadership courses across the country, but it's hard-pressed to find programs that help the executives move forward and take their place in the healthcare sphere. We also talked about the need to integrate academia, research, and service. And the DNP programs, whether it's in New York or in Abu Dhabi or in Cleveland, are really an exemplar of how to bring together service and academia. And again, the leadership that CASE has taken on in that area has been phenomenal. So I want to take that thinking one step further today, because this is like an incubator. And with the Shaughnessy Academy, with the brain trust that you get into your various programs, you are able to galvanize and trigger moving forward globally agendas that we know that the healthcare system needs it. And all we have to look at is the pandemic. And while 80% of the nurses of the healthcare during COVID have been managed by nurses, we all know that we don't find 80% of the nurses sitting in leading positions, making policy decisions, and seeking the funding and the support that over 8 billion people on this earth need. And everybody loses out. So I'm not here again to advocate for nursing. I am here to advocate for health. And I think we need to ask the question, what did we build the last 50 years? Who did we take with us on Noah's Ark or the nursing ark? Where we landed? And what are we building next? And I think it's safe to say, and I need somebody to tell me when I'm 10 minutes getting, okay, you will, great. It's safe to say that the progress we have made over the last 50 years, and we just need to look at the history of CASE, and we need to look at the Shaughnessy Academy in the last few years to see the evolution of nursing in the world. And I would say, as a global citizen, the US leading nursing in the world, and everybody is looking at what's going on in the US, in what used to be the place of the UK 100 years ago, that's really currently held by the US. And we're making progress, and it's not criticism of the progress, but where we need to go next. And this is something that I often talk about over the last 8 years. Where are we situated, and what did we build? In the nursing bubble, we did exceptionally well the last 50 years. We have doctoral programs, we have DNPs, we have tremendous funding for research. We really have done exceptionally well, but it is within the nursing bubble. As we get out of the nursing bubble and looking at the healthcare system, and we're looking at the state level, and looking at the global level, there is a diminishing presence. So if I would look 50 years ago, the most powerful person in a hospital was the matron. No one would challenge that individual. Well, today you would be hard-pressed to find out who is the chief nurse in the organization, around which table she sits or he sits, and so on and so forth. So while we have done incredibly well here, we have really not done well with the others. So in some ways you will say, who cares? But without caring, what it happens is that we don't have a presence and an influence, and we see what happens. And I think I'm not going to talk much about pandemic. I'm not going to talk much about Nursing Week, although I bring greetings to every single nurse in the world. But I think we need to open our mind and celebrate the good, and we really have done amazing things. The care patients get and the attention is amazing, and the knowledge we have, but that's not enough. It's just not enough. We need to think beyond that. And in order to understand that bigger picture, we need to keep our mind open. Because it's very easy to just say, okay, look at my CV. I published 10 articles in Q1 last year. Should we be so lucky? And so on and so forth. But that's not enough. We are here to make a difference globally. And the time has come for another breakthrough. We have done amazing things. And Mr. Shaughnessy, Marian, Joyce, Carol, what you have done with the Academy over the last few years was a breakthrough, because there is nothing else like that in the globe, never mind just in the US. So it's done, and we can never stop. We always go from good to great, great to terrific. So it's the time for the next breakthrough. And each one of you might have a different notion of what's that breakthrough. But unfortunately, for the next half an hour, you are forced to listen to my breakthrough. And what I appeal to you is to think out of the box. It's very comfortable and easy to stay in the box. We know it, we know the players, we can do well, we complement each other. I'm Canadian, so we are very proper and polite and always say the positive. But please, let's think out of the box and see what's the next frontiers. We know that there are global actors that go beyond what we think of the nursing bubble, the system bubble. And the reality is that what we do and happen in healthcare for everyone is actually far bigger than even the World Health Organization. And I am not sure that we are clear about that, and we move those agendas as we educate the current generation, the next generation, the executives, and so on. And there are actors that we don't mention. I can go through curriculum upon curriculum and so on, and I will not find many references or mention of the UN agencies. At best, you will hear about WHO, maybe ICN, the International Council of Nurses. In your situation, maybe the American Nursing Association, and so on. But those are the small potatoes. There are much larger players in the system that decide if Africa will have the vaccines that they need. Would chronic disease management, mental health, other things will happen. In spite of all our goodwill, there are much larger players. And the two giants that I hope I will communicate with you today, and why they are, in my mind, are the frontiers that need to be conquered, is the United Nations and the World Bank, including IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund. And I will ask you simply, and I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, because I don't think that that will be the right thing to do. We are here to celebrate, not here to feel otherwise. How much do you know about them? How much do you reference them? How often do you work with them? So when I started to talk a lot about policy engagement, and Becky was just telling me a wonderful story, my question was to audiences like you and others, how does discussion about policy looks in dissertations and theses? And if you take those documents, you will find 2 paragraphs at best, and that was like 10, 15 years ago. Some organizations moved forward and look at it differently, and I think we pushed some of the thinking around policy over the years. But I would ask you now the same thing about the UN, about the World Bank, which is one of the 16 UN agencies, and more. So let's start with the UN. And again, if I would ask you to write down what you know about it, it probably will be 3 lines. And I'm not here to insult or embarrass. I simply use myself and as an example, going back, and others, and so on. And we hear about the UN every day, but we don't hear about the agenda that we are concerned with. So the UN has 16 specialized agencies, And you will know about WHO. You also probably heard of the International Labor Organization that, for example, has over a 50-year-old amazing code about working conditions for nurses in hospital settings that if I would put it up right now, you would say, oh, that's probably based on the research of yesterday. It's 50 years old and it's still a convention that has not been signed by most countries, okay? The World Bank, which I will talk about it later, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organizations, UNICEF, UNESCO, and others that you hear more often about them. And the challenge I would have for you, if you take even those 6, do you really know what's their major mandate? Do you communicate those things with the groups that you're working with? So as we will be working more and more tomorrow on the board and others, how do we push some of those agendas? Because they are foundational, just like you cannot cook or bake, obviously I love cooking, with certain ingredients. If you don't understand these ingredients, the leadership is complicated. So let's talk about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. And when I asked a group of nurse executives how many of them know what they are, I had embarrassingly less than a handful of hands that went up. At the same time, it probably was before COVID. It's literally, my thinking it's BC, AC, it's kind of before COVID, after COVID. But before COVID, when Joyce and Linda and I went over to the business school, the business school's TV screen had the SDGs on together with the market of that day. But you go into nursing school or public health schools and you don't see that. The business community understand the value of the Sustainable Development Goals that were passed in 2015 by all heads of state in the United Nations, but somehow we are latecomers to the party to integrate it. And if we are, we primarily talk about the third indicator, which is health. But it's much bigger than that. So now I'm also going to touch on some of the issues of how it actually relates to you, because many of you are educators and researchers and influencers. So when I talk about the UN, contrary to the World Bank, the UN is a source of a lot of very important information and research and data that is very relevant to your work. So next time you sit down with your master's students or your PhD student or undergraduate students, the question is, so what data did you find on the UN agencies around your topic, okay? And for example, with the Sustainable Development Goals, there is a group that its responsibility is to evaluate the indicators and generate an annual report of how the progress happens. So there is incredible work around it. And if I take the 17 indicators, and again, I would say one more thing which I should have said in the beginning, many of my slides are cut off of public documents, so they are not my writings, and I'm not claiming priority or authorship of them. They are from existing documents, and they are taken verbatim. If I go back to, to this one, for example, I took it from the UN document and took exactly the paragraphs that are relevant to this, this discussion. And by the way, Ms. Amina Mohammed, who is chairing the committee, and she's also the Vice Secretary of the UN, is an unbelievably impressive individual who moves these agendas greatly. So I would look at Carol and university leadership. She's in New York. Inviting somebody like that for, I don't know, graduation ceremony or some other forums will go a long way in giving opportunities maybe to some of the faculty to get engaged, because they are looking for experts and ideas and so on and so forth. So if we take the 17 indicators, they can be grouped to what is known as the 6 Ps: people, prosperity, peace, partnership, and planet. But the most important message in the SDGs is that unless you take these 17 goals and work it together, we're not going to achieve the reduction in poverty and increase prosperity for the 7+ billion people, okay? And if you look at these goals, and I'm not going to go through one by one, I mentioned, I think, 2 in the coming slides. You see poverty, which we all understand, but there is no health with poverty. There's no health with hunger. If there are no inequalities, if we don't fix the inequalities, you're not going to get the same level of health. You know, women not going to get the same food as men get, or education, and so on. So understanding all of them, it's not sufficient to say, let's talk about good health and well-being. That's a proxy of a lot of other things. And we know from research that less than 25% of our health is determined by the healthcare system. A lot of it is determined by other factors. But if we look at that goal, to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages, these are some of the areas that have been identified and measured progress on a regular basis. So if you do any research associated to polio, life expectancy, maternal, child mortality, suicide, cause of death, financing healthcare, smoking, and so on, you're likely to find data that will be reflected and analyzed on progress. Again, I'm not going to go through any of this. This slide and the next one has some data, but I just want to give you a feel as researchers, so my comments are not just some esoteric, highfalutin comments, and that's very nice. Okay, let's get back to normal, of what you can find and what you can contribute by understanding what's coming there. So child mortality, orphan due to AIDS, and so on, and it's endless. The data is endless, and I'm not here to go through that data, but communicate the message. Goal 17, which really speaks to me significantly, is revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. And the UN explains that the successful sustainable development agenda requires partnership between government, private sector, and civil society. And I'm looking at Elizabeth's father, who is sitting here, and really the understanding, and Mike, the partnership between civil society, between all of the other factors, private sector, and so on, is just essential. So what government, what academia, what businesses bring together, if we do not understand what I call the triple helix together, we will not move forward, you know? And yes, you might be able to get tenure, and you might be able to be published, but you will not impact society. And what you are trying to do with the academy is to build that awareness that the people who are leading, like Carol Porter and others who are leading big systems, need to be part of all that mobilizing the agenda forward. We need the policy champions. This is a quote that somebody gave me that I said, okay. Never has there been a time when the voice of nurses are more urgently needed at high levels of policy formation and decision-making than they are now. And let's talk about some of the involvement in the UN. The woman with the purple shawl is Dr. Holly Shaw. Holly spends probably 50 to 60% of her time working with the UN. Nobody pays her a penny for it. She does it because she is understanding the importance of bringing the nursing voice around various tables. She is highly respected, and I know many of the DNP students that are Joyce related to in New York have spent time with her, and she's very generous with supporting and mobilizing Sigma ICN. She's the representative from ICN. But again, there is no support. She's doing it all because she understands the importance of it, and she chairs the mental health committee and others. And one of the conversations I'm going to have with Carol, when you retire, the UN is waiting for you. We really need individuals. And we need students to look into issues and provide support that then can be taken forward and tabled by experts like Holly and others with the various committees. So the opportunities are endless. Here are just some of the committees that you can find in the UN and other agencies, okay? So where is Mary Jo? Mary Jo, you are right here. I said the story, and I will get soon to the World Bank. When Mary Jo was doing her DNP, and she needed to do a practicum, Joyce, of course, she's like the biggest connector in the world, put the two of us together, and I realized that we need to penetrate the World Bank. Because when I became the president of the International Council of Nurses, I said to them, what global organizations you are connected with? So of course, WHO. And it started and finished there. And I said, no. That's not good enough. Based on my international work, I knew that the World Bank sets up policies and directions and use their monetary power to lead things. And I asked Mary Jo to start to build up the information of what's the World Bank about. I didn't know much about it in 2013, which is only 9 years ago. So please don't feel embarrassed or uncomfortable. It's a reality that we live in our bubbles. And Mary Jo will be acknowledged as the first person for me who have opened and prepared a beautiful document that told me what's the World Bank about. So again, I think the interaction and the opportunities we have are phenomenal. Just before I get to the World Bank, let's finish with the UN. So the UN, which hopefully you know, is really led and governed by heads of states. But there is a civil society component to it that is very powerful. So if I just take the women agenda, the CSW, every March, forget Corona, 10,000 women from all over the world land in New York without coats or without this and so on to bring their voice on the women's agenda issues. So the Economic and the Social Council initiate studies and reports with respect to international economic, social, cultural, educational, health and related matters. So using someone like Holly to find out what are the studies and see if there is a link of someone, whether it's a professor or a student or a PhD student working on it, could be very, very useful. Now, you can have consultative status with the ECOSAC, provides non-government organizations like you are, with access not only to the ECOSAC, but also to its many subsidiary bodies, to the various human rights mechanism of the UN, ad hoc process on small arms, as well as special events organized by the General Assembly. So the opportunities are there if you take it on. So that's the UN. The UN, basically, my two messages is, it's a house of data, it's a house of influence, but it's not for the faint-hearted, okay? And it's not for the, oh, I am in New York and I'm gonna go to the UN. No. It's an ongoing commitment, and if any of the nursing organizations and individuals takes it on, it's a journey that takes years to be engaged in, whether it's in a specific area or in a macro area. But the opportunities are there, and we do have the friends who can open those doors and so on. Now let's talk about the World Bank. How much time I have, Mary?
15.
Oh, perfect. Let's talk about the World Bank. The World Bank, while I talk about some of its components, listen also with the financial opportunities mined, both as consultants and participants in projects and so on. And again, it's not an instant thing, but it took us 50 years to really have strong acting role with NIH and other funding sources. It's possible. So the main goal of the World Bank, which is one of the UN agencies, is working for a world free of poverty. The World Family, the World Bank Group, has 5 different organizations, and it has lending and influence opportunities of different levels, some of them only for the low-income countries, others for middle income. So it is very relevant, and if you think about the stories of Greece was going to implode, and the World Bank was at its mercy and helped and so on. And I think I really realized the power of the World Bank when I was visiting Cyprus in 2012, before I became the president. And they were telling me of how they reduced their nursing workforce by 1/3. And when I asked why, they told that was the demand of the World Bank in order to get the loans, in order to keep Cyprus afloat. That wasn't exactly true, but that's a very convenient way of governments and politicians to put the story on the table. Yes, the World Bank demanded austerity measures, but how that austerity measures gets played out was dependent on the country. But it helped me to realize that if the World Bank and the people that leading some of those policies, because they have a health group, understand and be connected with, they are able to put expectations and standards that will be influential to the health of the people and so on. So that was part of my trigger, 2012, 10 years ago, of trying to understand a bit more around how that system works. If you look at the goals, and again, it's not my slides, it's the World Bank Group slide, their main dual role is to ending extreme poverty and increase prosperity. And how they can reduce people living for less than $1 a day, and now they talk about $1.70 and so on. And there are still hundreds of millions of people that live through that. Because I look at the ecosystem very differently than most people, because I really feel like I am floating in this global citizen context, I would say that China has done the best job over the last 20 years in lifting over 400 million people out of poverty. And I know all the political stories that we all have, but I think we need to acknowledge what some of countries have done. And here again, the description of the difference between the World Bank Group and the International Monetary Fund. And if you do read the New York Times or you listen to Business World, you hear the IMF mentioned frequently. And again, it has an incredible power of setting the monetary agenda in the world. And the IMF is all member countries can benefit from services and resources. Where in the World Bank Group, again, as I said, there are divisions that only deal with, let's say, certain continents or certain economic level. But here's a punchline for you to understand where you play into it. If you look at the World Bank shareholders, the US is the largest shareholder, okay? And that comes with power. It comes with the power of setting agendas, setting the voice, setting other agendas. So, and I will say, Becky, this with a broken heart. When I started working with the World Bank, I made an appeal for the American Nursing Association because they are in Washington. You have to build relationships, you have to walk the corridors, whatever, to lift up and be part of it. I was able to open the doors. My Canadian government been awesome in helping me, but I was in Geneva, I was in 50 different countries in a span of 3 years. I couldn't do it. And there wasn't the understanding of how important it is. And with the US having such a major shareholder and financing, whether it's through the various political agendas, the US has a lot to offer. Each country that it's a shareholder country has an office that it's based in Washington, and that was my entry through the Canadian office, who helped me to meet the other people. So there are ways to get into it, and I have to say that my work with the bank for 5 years, which was basically one huge project that they financed, research on workforce in 15 African countries, that the report was just released a year and a half ago, was phenomenal. They have people that get it. And Joyce, you came with me to some of the meetings, and there was a huge interest. There were other opportunities, but I was the sole player trying to drive it, and you can't do it. You need support, you need a system, and while ICN is interested in it, it's neither ANA or others stepped up to the agenda. So you do as much as you can. And to be honest, with my Hungarian genes and my Israeli genes, I was pushing and we got this done. ICN has not put in a penny except supporting some of my travel. And the bank put in hundreds of thousands to get that work done. But that's not enough. That's getting a report done, and now it's going into the country level and mobilizing the countries to demand the help from the bank to finance what needs to be done. But if there isn't, it's like one of my friends said, if you take a walk in the park and there's nobody following you, that's not leadership, just simply a stroll in the park. So again, we need to break through some of those things. There are some good news, and it's making progress. And the bank has 6 strategic themes. And and I don't know what happened to number 3. I was looking at it this morning, and somehow number 3 just disappeared. But the point is that, again, when we look at poverty reduction, they invest billions in education, centers of excellence. Again, it's something that we got involved with. And they put nursing as essential, one of the required ingredients. But the proposals that came in from those developing countries were either done by medicine, and they put a nurse on it, and they said this is a nursing proposal and whatever. I was also able to get a few nurses to go and evaluate projects. All I'm trying to say, and it's not me, all I'm saying that there is openness to do things, but you need players to move agendas forward. So the development project, if you look at it, just look at those numbers. In 1 year, over $34 billion been invested in different areas of development. And it's not all available to us, because those are monies that go directly to governments to build a dump or to build the hospital or whatever. But if you go through it, if you look at transportation, or you look at information, or you look at education, or you look at health and other areas, water and sanitation, you're not going to get health systems without proper water system and sanitation and so on. The opportunities are tremendous. And let me talk for the last few minutes about the procurement framework and business opportunities. And I'm not saying that you wake up tomorrow morning and say, okay, I'm going to go to the World Bank and get $1 billion to do this beautiful project I'm so passionate about. But I would say to you, look around the university, start that way, and see who else might be involved with the World Bank. And I guarantee you that between your engineering and medicine and the amazing faculties and experts you have, you will find some that are consultants or on projects or whatever. The second thing I would say If you are involved with any government, I know some of you work with governments in developing countries, that's the mechanism to get to it. And what projects they have with the World Bank, how the nursing community involved, how you can get involved and contribute to it. So for the year 2020, they spent $262 billion on worldwide projects, okay? It's not short change. And this is how that part of those get distributed, and there is some investment in health and public administration and others. This is the global commitment by region. So yes, they do phenomenal work in South America, phenomenal. The bulk of the work is in Africa and many other areas. And the World Bank, in many ways, trying to keep those countries honest, trying to manage corruption and other areas. So it's a good group to work with. Why bid on a bank-funded contract? And I'm not suggesting, again, that the next proposal you write, it's a World Bank proposal. But I want to bring it to your attention and noodle it with what's possible or not possible. Again, billions of dollars worth of business, opportunities to work globally, equal opportunity and fair treatment, variety of contract sizes, wide variety of consulting opportunities and others. And all I can say from my very limited experience is that every time I touched something and I said, let's talk about it, there was openness, there was impact, and again, it happens in the human relation level. This is, I'm just going to leave with you. Here are how to identify contract opportunities. The websites of this, whether it's the UN agencies or the bank, are amazing. But please remember, it's a very long journey, and unless you join the race, we will not break new frontiers. The future is not something we enter, the future is something we create. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shamian, for a very, very thought-provoking and exciting presentation. Now we would have time for one or two questions for Dr. Shamian. Yes, Mr. Shaughnessy.
You gave the pie chart of the investors.
You can just press the button on the table.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think it should work.
How's that?
I will.
Okay. You gave a pie chart graphic showing that 55% of the other
You can come here.
is invested, and we have a large investment. How's that happening? Why are we so significant relative to?
Because the US is significant in every of the global agencies. That's why whatever the administration you live under, when they're threatening to pull funding from WHO or others, people notice.
Yeah.
And really those financial levers are the ones that should be exercised in addition to other levers. And that's where I think the partnership between government, private sector, government, NGOs, and others are so powerful. Because if Carol goes in and says, I'm the Dean of Case Western and I want you, they'll say, okay, very nice. Mike goes in and says, look, I'm leading the business, and this is our commitments and so on. They listen. When the two of you go, all of a sudden there is an additional listen. And it breaks my heart, but money is still the number one lever with all global and non-global organizations. I tell the story that we just made a donation to an organization. I've been sweating buckets working for that organization and doing things for the last 6 years. Because we made a single contribution, all of a sudden I get a call from the president for the holiday. And you know what? That doesn't work. Yes, money is important, and what you do is incredibly powerful, and that allows us to do the other things. But you understand the partnership, and it gets recognized for what the university does to advance health, and it recognizes what the financial components do. So the collaboration is a must. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. Yes?
So thank you for all your work with the World Bank, and I was alarmed by the fact that you felt alone and that you were doing it and you needed a collaborative, you needed people behind you. So what are your strategies or ideas for getting a group together to lead forward with that work? Because nurses are not financially driven.
So I was very blessed because the leading individual in Africa from IMF and the bank, Dr. Kaba, was totally taken by the agenda. And I find in my career, unfortunately, that I get more support from the non-nursing community who get it. And somehow, look at the Shaughnessy family. They get it. You know, look at Elizabeth's father. You know, they get it. But we among ourselves are not as clear, and we are busy with our bubble. So I was very fortunate because Professor Robo Kama he financed. We had like 3 meetings of over 60 people in Africa with all the nursing leadership in Africa. And he financed it all. He must have spent close to $1 million in bank money. He moved the agenda. But he experiences now the same frustration as I do, because now the nursing community within the country level needs to work with the government to make the next round for the bank. The bank is open. They are willing to listen. But it has to come from the country level. So it's very complex, and that's why I'm saying that unless people are willing to partner, and that's why that SDG Goal 17 about partnership is so essential. To find the right partner, work with the right people, the sky's the limit, and I'm absolutely confident.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Shamian. Now I would like to have Dr. Fitzpatrick introduce our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Mary. And you all heard the introduction earlier about Elizabeth Grace Gowell. So what I'm going to tell you about Elizabeth Grace is what I have learned from her and why I believe that the future is in good hands. So, as you heard, Elizabeth Grace Gowell is a high school student. I personally started learning about the power of narratives some years ago when I started working with nurses to help them to tell their stories. And Mary Joy Garcia-Dia then introduced me to Elizabeth Grace and the power, the potential, and the power of telling stories about nurses who were immigrants to the US and beyond. So with Mary Joy's help and the Philippine Nurses Association of America, we partnered to capture the stories with Elizabeth Grace's leadership through the Justly Project. Elizabeth Grace has told the stories, countless stories, of immigrant Filipino nurses in the US and throughout the world. And I've had the privilege of being on panels with Elizabeth Grace, programs with Elizabeth Grace, and I've heard her tell the story, particularly of her grandmother, Lydia, who was an immigrant nurse. And Elizabeth Grace has captured so many stories that are so important to our profession. So welcome to this global symposium, Elizabeth Grace. And as we've gotten to know you, E.G., please join us here on the podium.
Thank you. I would like to begin by thanking Dr. Fitzpatrick for her kind invitation to speak on this very special occasion. It is an honor to be able to speak here today alongside so many distinguished leaders and to share my work in philanthropy and nursing with all of you. I'm the founder of the Justly Project, an organization that is dedicated to using oral history to raise support and awareness for the Filipino-American nursing community. One of the Justly Project's focuses is supporting nursing leadership, as I will describe later. So I am especially excited to share my experience in this area. This presentation also holds another layer of significance for me. The inspiration for the Justly Project's efforts to support the nursing community sprang from the life of my grandmother, Lydia Espina Gowell. My grandmother died in January, and when Dr. Fitzpatrick invited me to speak, she suggested that this might be a way to honor her memory. I am profoundly grateful to have this opportunity to share my grandmother Lydia's story with all of you and the ways that her legacy has inspired our work at the Justly Project. To begin, I'd like to share a little bit about my grandmother's life and the beginnings of the Justly Project. I'll then discuss some of the ways that the Justly Project has sought to support the Filipino-American nursing community. The Justly Project has its roots in the origins of the summer of 2019, when I asked my grandmother if she would be willing to take on a project together. I asked if she would be willing to. I knew her as a wonderfully loving, kind, and generous person who had spent her life and career as a nurse compassionately caring for others. I also knew that she had immigrated from the Philippines after surviving the Japanese invasion of the islands of World War II. But as I grew older, I became curious to learn more about my grandmother's experience of a remarkable period in recent history and to understand her experiences as an immigrant and nurse in North America. I hope to make these discoveries in a somewhat formal way that could be preserved, and if my grandmother was amenable to it, to share it more broadly with others. She graciously agreed to allow me to take her oral history, and during the week of her visit, we sat down every day together, so I asked her about her life and filmed our discussions. And I could not have imagined how much would come from those conversations. I learned about my grandmother's parents, her siblings, and their aspirations before the war. I also learned of the fear of World War II and how my grandmother, still just a child when the Japanese invaded, had to flee into the jungle with her family to survive. I learned how she helped collect food and firewood for her community, how she prayed with her siblings and parents, how she dove into a foxhole when the bombers came overhead. But more than that, I learned how, though a small child, she had to be brave and persevering and strong in these unimaginably difficult circumstances. My grandmother told me she never stopped seeing the beauty in the birds, in the trees, in the people, even in these harsh times. After World War II, life returned to something like normal in her village, and she began to see the impact of American aid. She told me about the first movie she ever saw, Robin Hood. I learned that she was a straight-A student, and although she had contemplated becoming a nun, she decided to pursue a career in nursing at the encouragement of God and her teachers. She was as hardworking as she was intelligent, and she was ranked first place in her school and won a scholarship to support her study. After she had completed her training, she had the opportunity to go abroad to the USA to work. She jumped at the chance to improve her life, and, as she told me many times, to provide better for her family in the Philippines. My grandmother was always thinking about how she could help others before herself, a lesson she said that she learned during the hardship of the war. In the USA and Canada, she continued her career as a nurse while selflessly supporting her family back home. Her spirit touched all of her children and grandchildren. Although I had only set out that summer to learn more about my grandmother's story, I was inspired by her profound dedication and wanted to do something in my own life that would help others and build on her legacy. Ultimately, I created a feature-length documentary from our conversations called Do Justly, Love Mercy, and Walk Humbly, basing the title on my grandmother's class motto from nursing school. I thought that this biblical quotation, Micah 6:8, captured the spirit of service, humility, and compassion that animated every choice in her life. This documentary became, in turn, the basis for the Justly Project, an organization that I founded to honor my grandmother's career as a nurse helping others. The Justly Project is dedicated to bringing awareness and raising support for Filipino American nurses. In my grandmother's honor, we have raised tens of thousands of dollars and shared the stories of dozens of other Filipino nurses who, like her, have chosen to make great sacrifices for others. After the world was gripped by the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, the Justly Project's mission became especially urgent. It quickly became clear that Filipino American nurses who served on the front lines, often in the most intensive care units, with the sickest patients requiring high contact, round-the-clock care, were experiencing the brunt of the pandemic. By September 2020, Filipino American nurses constituted over 30% of all COVID-related deaths among registered nurses in the USA, despite only making up 4% of all registered nurses in the US. At the Justly Project, I immediately turned all of my energies to addressing the collective trauma that Filipino American nurses have experienced during the pandemic. I reached out to the Philippine Nurses Association of America, which was running our Heal Our Nurses campaign in support of Filipino American nurses affected by COVID. Partnering with the PNAA, the Justly Project raised over $21,000 in support of this initiative. This was just the beginning of several events undertaken with the PNAA and other organizations in order to fulfill the Justly Project's mission. I'd like to tell you a little more about those now. The Justly Project has deepened our work in 3 areas of focus in the past years. First, we've continued our work in oral history. In 2020, we began a narrative nursing partnership with the PNAA called Spark Justly. The name of the initiative comes partly from a narrative nursing program that the PNAA launched under the leadership of Dr. Garcia Diaz, called Spark: Stories of People, Achievement, Resilience, and Kindness. The purpose of Spark Justly is to capture and share the stories of Filipino American nurses. Taking a holistic oral history approach, the project aims to document the lives and careers of the selfless Filipino American nurses working in hospitals and medical facilities around the country. Along with PNA President Dr. Garcia Diaz and nurse historian and registered nurse Ren Capuco, we have interviewed and recorded oral histories from dozens of Filipino nurses in the USA and around the world. These interviews include urgent reflection on the COVID-19 pandemic, but they also look beyond the pandemic to set the work of these Filipino-American nurses in their life narratives, which include stories of education, family, immigration, discrimination, and above all, courageous and compassionate care. The Spark Justly interview recordings have been deposited in the PNAA archives to create a historical record for the community, and we have also created shorter clips posted online which focus on a range of important topics. These clips have allowed us to recognize and honor Filipino-American nurses, to educate the public about the Filipino-American nursing community, and the challenges it faces, and to drive philanthropic support. Season 1 of Spark Justly ran from January to July of 2021 and produced over 200 clips from over a dozen interviews. And Season 2, which began in September 2021, is ongoing. The video clips can be viewed on PNAA and Justly Project social media accounts, and the full archive can also be viewed on the Justly Project's website, dojustly.com. A second area of focus for the Justly Project has been education and research. The Justly Project wants to encourage others to capture inspirational oral histories with the power to make change, especially but not only in the American nursing community. To that purpose, I have created detailed written guides for students that describe the oral history research process used to create the documentary Do Justly, Love Mercy, and Walk Humbly. I host this documentation on the website as a guide for those who would like to interview family, friends, acquaintances, colleagues, and others to learn more about and share their stories. Beyond this, the Justly Project also aims to increase its impact by supporting research initiatives that will empower others wishing to help their communities. And with the PNAA, we have established a long-term research project utilizing the qualitative data from the Spark Justly oral history interviews, as well as quantitative data collected from social media and other online user engagement efforts of narrative nursing initiatives. Our discoveries will transform our mission and efforts to tell the stories of nurses. Dr. Garcia Dia, Emerita President of the Philippine Nurses Association of America, presented data from the Justly Project at the International Council of Nurses 2021 Congress in November 2021, and we are at work on future projects together. Finally, a third and increasingly important part of the Justly Project's mission has been empowerment and leadership. Despite their outsized contributions to American healthcare, Filipino-American nurses remain underrepresented in leadership roles in government, business, and healthcare, and urgently need advocacy from within the community. The Justly Project has aimed to support a number of key endeavors that will empower Filipino-American nurses and to empower Filipino-American nurse leaders to advocate on behalf of their communities at the highest level of decision-making in the USA. Most excitingly, we have partnered with the Philippine Nurses Association of America, the Marian Shaughnessy Nurse Leadership Academy, and the Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing at Case Western Reserve University, and the Cold Iron Senior Nurse Executive Fellowship to sponsor participation of senior nurse leaders in the Cold Iron Fellowship. The inaugural Cold Iron Justly Fellow, Dr. Garcia Dia, completed the program in January 2022, And the next fellow, Dr. Gloria Barriones, president-elect of the PNAA, has begun this program this year. The Justly Project has been able to partner with the Marian K. Shaughnessy Nurse Leadership Academy, which we are celebrating today, to support the effort to create transformative opportunities for nurses. The Nurse Leadership Academy is providing Cold Iron Fellows with the skills and knowledge needed to succeed in executive positions in healthcare and academic nursing, including roles as chief nursing officers, heads of academic nursing departments, and leaders of government and non-governmental agencies. At the Justly Project, I cannot wait to see the great things that these transformative leaders will do for their communities and for their patients. Giving back is at the center of everything that we do at the Justly Project. And in the last several minutes, I've shared just a few of our initiatives and that aim to give back to the Filipino-American nursing community. In the Filipino-American nursing community that has given so much to its patients around the world, I am excited to deepen and expand our work in the next coming months and years. In honor of my grandmother, Lydia, I would like to share a few final remarks on her legacy. I will always treasure the opportunities that I had to get to know even more about my grandmother's story in the last few years of her life. Her experiences and memories will forever continue to shape me and will always push me to be braver, stronger, and kinder. Her faith will always inspire me, as it inspires all of those who learn from her story, to work for a better world. As I contemplate the future, I hope to share her legacy of love, humility, and justice in everything that I do. May we all remember the Bible quote that she cherished, Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Lydia has shown us all what is good. She will be greatly missed by those who loved and knew her. But we know that her spirit lives on every time that we decide to act justly and to love mercy. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth Grace, for that very moving, wonderful tribute that you have created for your grandmother. The stories, her life, everything. It is just a wonderful, wonderful tribute. Thank you. I have time perhaps for just one question, if there was a question for Elizabeth Grace. Or perhaps we will have time at the end, or just to have some conversation with you. Okay. Now it is time for our panel discussion. So if our panel can just make their way here to the top. We've got 4 of our doctoral students that are kindly going to take part in our panel discussion. We have Ziana from Oman, Hiba from Saudi Arabia, the A is missing there, Sue from Thailand, and Hanging from China. So we have a good cross-section from the global community here with us this afternoon. So the first question I'm going to give is to Ziana. Ziana, having listened to Dr. Shamian talk about health and well-being this afternoon, what are the main causes of the mortality and morbidity in Oman? Do you know?
Thank you so much. Do you hear me? Okay. So going back to the sustainable development goals and also I was truly thinking about mainly, let's think frankly about the social determinant of health. That is one aspect that we frequently talk about. And the reason why I brought that, now in 1970, I'm talking about Oman, so before His Majesty took the lead, we have only one hospital. Now think about it, one hospital, 5 million to be served by one hospital, and one famous doctor everyone knows, Dr. Thomas. Everyone knows, all of our our grandmothers, fathers, they all love him so much. You can say that they worship him with all things that he does. Now the stories that we hear from them that they need to travel for days. Now this is another thing. One hospital, limited access, they travel for days. Then we talk about other issues related to social determinant of health, and also when we think about the sustainable development goals, we think also about the infrastructure. Do we have transportation? Also the poverty. So they travel 4 days in order for them to reach the city. And we think also about the streets that are not well prepared. Some of them might not make it. Some of them, unfortunately, I remember my grandmother telling us, like, some of the pregnant women died before reaching to the care. And some of them, they don't get the care. So now we are talking about the limited access, one hospital. Now, after His Majesty took the lead, now we tackled many things. Now we talk about the partnership, and we established not only looking at the goal 3, but we tackle all 17 goals. Expanding the number of hospitals, the healthcare facilities, the primary healthcare systems, because in order for us to provide a better access, then we need to expand. But it's not only about the expansion, but also improving the quality. Now, the quality beside the quantity of the healthcare services, now we talk about preparing healthcare providers, for example, with the advanced skills, advanced specialties. Now, we have tackled many issues. Now, the latest one is still going on the cardiac. Now, at the level of Oman and even the Middle East, we started building many cardiac centers, because that is very important in order for us to tackle also the cardiac ischemic heart attack. Then we need to have better access also, and then beside the better access, we have to prepare also healthcare providers. It's not only the healthcare providers, we need to partner with the other section, because the stakeholders, even the population, complain, you know what, it takes us around maybe 2 hours to travel to the city. Then how can we manage that? By providing other centers, by providing other facilities, which is timely based for them to get the appointment on time. So there are many things. So if I say, like, we look at the goal 1, only the maintaining the well-being, we need to tackle all issues that will also improve the social determinant of health. So going back to the second part, which is the community nurses' right.
I think we'll just leave that for the second part.
Oh.
Thank you very much, Ziana. So the second question that I have is for Hanging. So we are, as you all know, experiencing this global shortage of nurses. In China, are there specialist roles for nurses?
Sorry about that. Okay. Thanks for asking this question. And same as the other countries in this world, China is also experiencing a shortage of nurses. And in a 2020 report, there are 4.71 million RN in China. However, consider the large population, we only have 3.34 RN per 1,000 people. So we do have the specialist role for nurses in China, but the specialist nurse training was start late, like in 2007. The government developed the specialist nurse training outline. After 14 years, a survey in 2021 shows that the proportion of specialist nurse has reached more than 10%, which is about 400,000. And the field include intensive care, emergency care, operating room, organ transplantation, cancer, wound stomach care, maternal and infant care, clinical nutrition supporting, and blood purification. However, some problems also exist in the training and development of the specialized nursing training in China. First of all, there is a lack of a uniform standardized for certification training. And the second one is that the management system of certification needs to be improved. And the third one is that hospital position and the responsibility setting for specialized nursing in China.
Okay, thank you very much. That was very enlightening. So the third question will be for Hiba. Hiba is from Saudi Arabia. Hiba, can you just briefly tell us what initiatives are in place in Saudi Arabia to help increase patient safety? You can come to this mic.
So for patient safety, we have the large national project which will measure and enhance patient safety culture. And that project, consequently, we will check the safety in the hospital, and it is one of the requirement for the accreditation of the hospital. But I would like to highlight the mHealth application to enhance the patient safety in Saudi Arabia. And during pandemic, the mHealth application was in the revolution level. For example, we have the mHealth application. It become like a passport for all of the Saudi citizens. It is connected to your government document. And for example, you cannot enter a shopping mall until you show that you are clear. So also one of the things that one of the mHealth application, one of them, all of the Saudi citizens have to have that application because it's connected to every governmental area. And one of the things is promoting health and safety of the public during COVID pandemic by notifying the users if they become into a close contact with the infectious individual. Also, the other mHealth application was to provide health care protection to accelerate recovery for individuals who self-isolate themselves and quarantine. They will these application will notify you, now you're you finished from quarantine period and now you can continue with your normal life. So I thought that mHealth application was a great thing that the government was focusing on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hiba. And our final question is for Sue from Thailand. So if Sue can tell us briefly about the education system in Thailand for nurses.
Thank you so much for a great question. So I would like to tell you about the nursing education system in Thailand. So I just want to give you a brief history about nursing education there. Nursing education in Thailand has over 100-year history. In 1896, the first nursing school and midwifery was established in Bangkok, Thailand, in the wish to reduce the maternal death and infant mortality rate. In 1956, the first bachelor degree program in nursing education was developed. In 1971, a master degree education was developed. And in 1999, the doctoral degree was established. Recently, Thailand has over 86 accredited nursing schools that teach in the different levels, and the number is growing. Starting from nurse assistant, which is spent 2 years for that, Bachelor of Nursing Science, 4 years for pursuit, Master degree in nursing, spend 2 or 3 years, and PhD in nursing, we spend 3 to 5 years according to the student project. Moreover, we also have nurse specialist program such as nurse practitioner, emergency nurse practitioner that allow registered nurse who would like to go deeper in their clinical practice. So the main goal is to improve the well-being of Thai people and people all over the world through nursing skill and the research. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to thank our panel members for their participation in our discussion, Zina, Hanging, Hiba, and Sue. Thank you. So I would just like to talk briefly about some of the programs that we have here at the School of Nursing and our commitment that we have had to internationalization. So here is a list of all of the global collaborations that we have here at FPB. I am sure that I have forgotten some of them. I noticed that I have missed Seoul from South Korea. But you can see that we have collaborations almost throughout the globe in various ways. Some are for education, some are for research. And I'd just like to point out Kenya there, the Turkana Basin Institute. Dr. Debbie Lindell is just on her way back from there after having a Fulbright for the last 8 months there. So she is sorry that she can't be here with us today. And we really look forward to hearing all the stories she has, as she has really impacted nursing in that particular area in helping them to set up a bachelor's in nursing program. So just to briefly talk about the global programs that we have at FPB. As you all know, we are globally recognized as a leader in science, education, and research. We welcome visiting scholars from throughout the world, from all educational backgrounds, for intensive study programs. So we invite students and have students in our BSN program, MN program, MSN, DNP, and PhD. I believe that right now we have students internationally in all of these programs. Our BSN international student body is certainly growing. We have a very active visiting scholars program. We are able to provide customized programs matched to educational goals of the visiting scholar, and these may include a clinical focus or a clinical observation or a research experience. These students that come, they are usually pre-doctoral or postdoctoral fellows. They come ranging from 6 weeks to a full year. Again, it's a customized program and we match them with our faculty. We also have requests and invitations come to us for visiting faculty. So visiting faculty come from many of our collaborating universities, and they come to hear and to observe our expertise in our education, particularly our simulation, now also our wet lab, and our research areas. We are inviting have a delegation coming in June from Thailand, who are very interested in some of the initiatives that we have here at FPB. We also have the study abroad and exchange programs. Unfortunately, due to COVID, a number of these have been on hold. Our study abroad that we are planning for next year, we are planning for students to go to Ireland, also to Spain and to Brazil. So these will be programs for undergraduate students. Then we have study abroad also for our graduate students, and the graduate students in the nurse practitioner program, they go to Guatemala. and there will be 2 times in the year that they go for that experience, and they get pediatric experience, particularly there. So again, our programs with the study abroad were on hold with COVID. Fortunately, a couple of our visiting scholar programs did continue as our collaborating universities asked us if we could provide them virtual. So that was a new experience for us. But it worked very, very well, and it is certainly something that we will continue to explore in the future. So I'd like to thank you now, and I would like to invite Dr. Fitzpatrick to come and talk about the Mary Kay Shaughnessy initiatives. I'll have to go. There you go.
The Marian K. Shaughnessy Nurse Leadership Academy is pleased to co-sponsor this event with the International Office of FPB. We work very closely together as we expand our initiatives globally through nurse leadership. We have a global advisory board. Dr. Shamian, who you heard from, has pushed us at every board meeting to make sure that we consider the global environment for nurse leadership development. We also have an FPB internal advisory board, co-chaired in the previous year by Dr. Rebecca Patton and Dr. Celeste Alfies, and thank you for your work internally. And Dr. Mary Delinsky has taken over from Dr. Celeste Alfies as co-chair for the future. So thank you all for your past work and your continued work. One of our signature programs is the Code Iron Senior Nurse Executive Fellowship Program, which you've heard about from Elizabeth Grace in the Justly Project sponsorship of Dr. Garcia Dia and Dr. Gloria Barriones. We have some other Code Iron Fellows here today and some future fellows in our audience as we record this program and spread it widely. We're thankful to the Code Irons for their sponsorship of this program. We have a Miller's Fellows postdoctoral program. Dr. Linda Everett, who's here, heads up the postdoctoral program funded by the Miller Foundation, and we've had a number of postdoctoral fellows in the past year. They finished in May of 2021, and we're in our second cohort of postdoctoral fellows. We have a Miller Scholars DNP Executive Leadership track and a new initiative, educational initiative, the MSN in Leadership and Administration. And Dr. Nathaniel Schneider is heading up the MSN in Leadership and Administration. And of course, we have our Founders Circle, which is a group of our alumni and friends from around the country who have committed their own resources to continue their networking and continuing education with us and have helped to co-sponsor this program today. So we have 43 members of the Founders Circle who have committed their personal resources to continue this program. So we have a number of other programs through the Shaughnessy Leadership Academy, and we thank the Shaughnessy family, Mike Shaughnessy, who is here, for the continued support and encouragement for us to break new barriers globally and to chart the course, Marian's vision to help nurses through the development of nurses as leaders to be global citizens in healthcare and in the communities that they serve. So we're here to carry out Marian Shaughnessy's vision for nurses and nursing. And so whatever you want to know about the future of the Leadership Academy, please inquire. Thank you all for your attendance here. And thank you, Dr. Quinn Griffin, for your leadership for international nursing.
Now I would like to invite Dr. Carl Musal to come to make some more presentations.
I would like to thank everyone, especially our speakers, especially speakers who traveled from a distance to come and work with us today. It's truly inspiring, and I think it really speaks to the power of one individual in changing the world. So thank you all.
This is for Elizabeth. These are for the 4 students. Thank you very much, Dr. Musal. I think the only thing for me to do now is to thank all of you for your participation here this afternoon. We have had, I think, some fantastic conversations and talks from the speakers, and so I would just like to thank you all for coming. Thank you.